Welcome to the PlayAbly podcast, where we dive into the art and science of gamification, customer engagement, and driving conversion. Whether you're an e commerce brand, a marketing innovator, or just curious about the future of interactive experiences, you're in the right place. At PlayAbly, we specialize in turning passive audiences into active customers through shoppable games and playable experiences that transform how brands connect with their customers. Thanks for listening.
And we're back with another episode of the PlayAbly podcast. Joining me once again is our head of UX and game design, Seema. Seema, welcome once again to the PlayAbly podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And today we're talking about something just super special and so awesome. And that is your background. I know that I think we were at the NRF conference 2 weeks ago when somebody who is at another company that does something with games was like, what does a game designer do? Why
That's
do you need a
right.
game designer? Which is very concerning considering they were making games for their clients as well. But so I think it is important to talk about, what does the game designer do? And, you've been doing this for a really long time and you came from like the arts and museum spaces doing it there. So Seema, please tell us about your life.
So, this is your life, Seema. I think what's interesting is in some ways, everyone's sort of been a game designer. Like if you've ever tricked out, we did an episode a few weeks ago about Monopoly. And if you've ever like put two Monopoly boards together, you in some ways have designed a game. And I think a lot of people like maybe for a baby shower or your like school project, you've done things that you sort of game-y. And I think that one thing that happens is a lot of companies will do something like use a spinner, my least favorite thing, or use like a scratch board, which I don't mind scratch boards. But I think that the problem actually is that because we all think we kind of can do it, we don't realize that there's actually a lot of psychology that goes into game design. And so I have been doing this for like 25 years. And I think the biggest thing I have learned is that good game design is a special skill. And if you don't have it, you should have somebody else do it. Because a bad game, and we've all been to parties where like they try to have a game and it's a little bit like a bad joke where you have to explain it. And a bad game is just, it's like, why are we doing this? And I have been to so many showers. Maybe it's my gender and my age, but I've been to so many showers where I'm like, this is not a game, actually.
And I think a lot of things like can make it bad where it's like the experience is bad. It just doesn't cover everything. And it's like, oh, well, what happens if this thing happens? It's like, oh, I don't know. I can't imagine, like, I can't remember how many times I've had the rules to White Elephant explained to me. And it's like different every single time. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, let's just establish everybody, like we're all get on the same basis.
Yes. And I think that's one of the things that happens. Like one of the things I was talking to a friend of mine who did come out of gaming, and it used to be that in many nonprofits, they would have people who did gaming because games are actually underlying a lot of interactives in museums. Or I did a thing where we did all these digital games during COVID or whatever. So games are very universal in education. There's probably no elementary school class you've taken that didn't have at least one gamification. Like if you're doing a reading challenge, that's gamification. So if you've ever done like read 10 and you get a blah, 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 that's
That
gamification.
pizza, you get your personal
That's right.
pizza every
That's
10
right.
bucks.
But
I took
I
advantage
didn't
of that.
know-
We
I
did
didn't know when
porn,
it
so I
stopped.
really liked it.
I did like that. I didn't know when it stopped, so I didn't know if you had that one. I definitely had that one. But I think that one of the things that happens is that people play them, but they don't understand them. And so like the first thing we're both talking about is a win state. And if you have to explain the win state, and White Elephant's a great example of it, what's the win state? Because actually the white elephant is the lose state.
Yes.
Right. And that's why it's confusing because the name is the lose, not the win. Right. Like, whereas Monopoly, the monopoly is the win. Right. To have a monopoly on a color means you're winning. And so I think like there's like those things that are so simple. And now I say it and you're like, of course. But like if you're not a designer, you wouldn't think about that. Right. So I think that's a huge part of what's challenging. I think the bigger thing that I was talking to somebody who's a game designer, I can't even remember who it is. And we were talking about how hard it is. I used to work with a lot of students to teach them game design. And they really wanted to prove they were smart because they're students. And like, that's a natural student behavior. And I totally respect that. So they'd make them too complicated. And I used to say, like, directions should only be 3, right? Like, do this, and do this. Done. If you have more than that, it's too far. Like, I could tell you Uno, match the card, finish all the cards, yell Uno when you have your last one. Literally 3 things. Now, I know there's a lot more to Uno. We play very competitively in my house. But if you summarized it, that would get you to understand Uno.
I was going to say there's a lot of board games.
I know. But I think that those board games are for a very specialist audience. That's the other thing. Like when we're building our games here, I mean, I've built really specialized games. I worked like one of my favorites is I built a game with a team of people about the Silk Route, which is the route that like it was really from, let's say, 600 to 900 is like the height of the Silk Route. And they traded from China all the way to Venice. But instead of going straight across, they would go like a relay race. And so we did a board game that did it. And the rules were you can't go more than 2 stops. You have to make more money and your camels can't die. Like that's it. Right? Like that's all you need. And that helped you understand this huge complex, but it didn't help you understand everything. Like they're not going to get like all of it. And I think that for a lot of brands, one of the things, especially like we've had these conversations with these very specialized brands and they have so much to tell me. And I'm like, they can't hear that. If they're not using your like About Us page, they're not going to do it in a game.
I think that goes with sort of the theme of the game when we're thinking about like what type of game to build people when they're like using a spinner, but they have a really complicated product that people don't understand. And then on their product page, they have, just a bunch of text that's like, this is how it works and this is everything. And I think one of the ways that we really excel is taking that and turning it into an interactive game so that people can learn while having fun or winning or whatever.
Well, it is a win, right? Buying it is a win. I think like one of the things I find so interesting is they'll explain the product to us and it takes 10 minutes. And then we're like, we need something that's fun to explain it. And they're like, why? And I was like, you just took 10 minutes to explain somebody. I was like, you just proved it. And I think what's so funny is they don't realize the game could show their passion better than that text. You know, I mean, like my favorite game, and before this podcast, I was trying to think of what's my favorite game. And I've done so many over the years. And one of my favorite ones was, we did a murder mystery party. Now, I will tell you, a murder mystery is not necessarily a game. So there are murder mysteries that like don't actually have a solution. So they're like a Miss Marple or something where you actually can't solve it. You know how like some of those books don't have all the clues, so you can't put it together?
Yeah.
And then somebody comes and is like, you're at a party and the answer is, you know, like that kind of thing. That isn't a game. Ours was basically like Clue, the board game. And the reason I loved it actually was because it was pretty simple. I mean, yes, like you had to find the clues and whatnot, but actually if you found the clues, it was easy. It was like a logic puzzle and you just crossed them off and you figured it out. Because a good game should feel doable. I don't mean it should be easy, but it should feel accomplishable. That's
like
not a
you
word.
can win.
Yes, exactly.
And I know we talked about a lot about the motivations of different players and the Bartle player personality. So we won't get into that on this podcast because I think I mentioned it on every single podcast, definitely with John. But I'd love to talk about like, you know, the game mechanics versus sort of the storytelling element or the theme element. And like, how do you balance that?
It's hard. I always would prefer storytelling to, like, I'd rather a simple game mechanic with a better storytelling, particularly in this facet, like where you're trying to sell something and it's really quick. I've done really complex games. And I will say that storytelling is a lot easier with a role-playing game. Another favorite game of mine, and I don't know that this will be funny for this audience, but it's hilarious when I talk about it in museums. But a lot of museums have women's groups. So they're like the volunteers who help with like, you know, finding your seat and whatnot. And they're usually like older women who really mean well, but they don't understand teenagers at all. And so they would work with our teen group with us. And they were always like, the teens were basically, we were like, it's like running a teen where the teens are helping the seniors instead of vice versa. And so we did a game where it was a zombie game. So the women's council was the zombies And the kids had to help each other not become women's council by learning things about the art. And the women's council loved it. They thought it was so hilarious because they knew that they meant well. They kind of knew the role that they had, and it was so funny. The women's council loved being zombies, but the questions were pretty easy, right? The mechanic was simple. Stay away from zombies and learn things to get, like, what do you call it? Be safe from zombies, like an inoculation. So the game mechanics was simple, but the reason it worked was the storytelling, right? Because that's like the fun part. A lot of people get into when they're doing games is they get so tied up in the mechanics. Actually, that's the same problem with the spinner. They're like using a mechanic and not a story. And the other problem with mechanics is once you figure it out, it's a bore. Right? Oh, yeah. Like, I think like one of the things I find really, like the thing I always think when I have family that are young or people that I know who are young, when they figure out Candyland is really like kind of a bore. Because they lived on the storytelling, right? They wanted the cards and they loved the gummy bear and the lady and the blah, blah, blah. And then when they figure out the mechanic, the storytelling kept them for a long time. Right? So it's like good storytelling. But if you're playing dice and you're just throwing dice, like you figure that out, there's no storytelling.
So the storytelling is really what encourages that replayability and the ability to keep people in. I know at the company that we used to work at, Unity, what made us really was the fact that we had the ability to know who the players were of the different games and give the tools so that game developers could make the game harder and know, okay, this person plays a lot of games, so we're going to start them on level 15 versus starting someone who's never played games on level 1. And that way they were able to keep the games more sticky, get them to buy more in-app purchases. Yeah. And so I think
we do a lot of that with data. Like we do a lot of that with data. So we can basically split audiences in the back end and with data kind of figuring out not about gameplay, but about the products they want, for example, or like the kind of version of Tinder, they're going to get these products instead of those products, let's say. So I think that like it is about knowing, but I also think, and I'm like the only one who didn't work at Unity, but I will say from my experience about gaming, I was talking to somebody we were at, an NRF, and I was talking to this guy and he was just, like, I don't know, we're chatting and he was saying, oh, I'm originally from New Hampshire and then I'm in Colombia. And I said, oh, you moved for love? And he was like, how'd you know that? And I was like, but it's because like I talked to I must have in my lifetime talked to, hundreds of thousands of people by now. And you actually, part of building games is understanding people. There's an empathy and there's like a thing that I think it's just a skill that some people have, they've accrued. And actually, like I've talked to enough people, but we use that same kind of data analysis to also predict what game is the right one for them. Like we're not, we always say to brands, like it's not like there's magic in here. Like we're using data. It's predictable.
Right. And I think that really helps the games feel, like the audience wants to play them. They enjoy playing them. They have a positive association then with the brand.
Exactly. And then the positive association, like we used to do this game. We used to run this big event that had like huge, like 5,000 room space. And we build like a giant mousetrap game or huge, or giant snakes and ladders. What's funny is I do think mousetrap in a general rule is not a great board game. Like it's like not actually that fun. So sometimes you can trick people by doing something amazing, like putting in like this was scale, what was amazing. And I do think like design can trick people to like things. I think mousetrap actually design tricks you. And then when you put it with scale, but something as simple as like we would have, checkers with art. People loved it because they understood it. And it was like, they were like, oh, that's fun. I know that. And they would just play.
Yeah. I know a lot of our games, we reskin them, we rebrand them so that it is an understandable mechanic that can get used, and then we overlay the story on top.
I know that I've said this before, but I love our game where you just run and jump and grab things. We can reskin it in lots of ways. But I do think it goes, original Nintendo, it's, Mario, all those games are kind of the same, right? You're just trying to get across a level and take a thing. But isn't shopping that? Right? Like shopping is that, right? Like you're just trying to get across Target, X department store and get the thing you want. And I think reskinning it, it's like, why would we come up with some other metric when half the platform games are literally just running across a thing and grabbing a thing?
Oh my God, that'd be so much fun. Just a game of, yeah, a live store. And you have to like, because I mean, we talked about the supermarket sweep thing, and I would kill if we don't.
I would love a supermarket to hire us to do a supermarket sweep. I would love it.
We'll give you guys a discount if you have a grocery store.
Yes, that's right. We will give you a discount and we'll make it so much better than the old supermarket sweep. It'd be so fun. And what would be fun is, particularly for like my local grocery store, they have a lot of great deals. Like they could only sweep in the store brand. That'd be so fun. But again, see, like, I just designed a game within an easy metric.
Yeah.
And we added the story, right? The store brand. That is like what we do. Like we can do this so quickly because this is our job.
Yeah. And I think it's fun too, because I know during the discovery meetings, the onboarding meetings, everyone has an idea for a game, especially if they're the founder of their company, they've been there for forever, and they're like, here's 8 things that like I already have an idea for. Obviously, we can't build all of them, but I think it's great that they, think so much about it, and it's not something you have to necessarily put a ton of effort into. Like, we'll refine it for you, but yeah, if you have ideas, like coming to the meeting with them, I think that's great. So adding games into an e-commerce store, we've talked a lot about physical games, and there's additional challenges that come with the store. How do you keep it from being distracting?
You know what? This is so funny because so many people ask us this, and I'm like, this is actually the easy part. I think so many, like maybe because I am a game designer, but I'm a UX designer. And there are so many things on people's websites that are just, I'm like, what are you doing here? Like every website, and I always say to people when I'm like, oh, your website's good. I said, I don't usually say that. I say that like you're really good. I think that actually what people don't realize is what are the things that are distracting people and what are actually focusing people. So our games are all specifically to focus you on something. We always start every game with what is your goal? And then we will meet the goal with the game. And we will bound the game by your goal. And the games are very short. So they're all about like, if let's say you're watching a social media video and your brain just goes straight to it, that's what our games are. They are all of the social, like all of those behavioral science clues. Game designers really focus a lot on behavioral science. That's what we're doing. We are not. And I think that that's where people kind of get confused because in our hobbies, we play games to relax. But they don't realize that they're relaxing by focusing on that thing. Right? So if you were playing Monopoly to make money, imagine if you were playing a game to buy your brand. It's the same thing. It's focus. It's just focus on that thing. And the things that their websites are often doing is taking away. Like the pop-up that means nothing, right? They don't get anything out of it. It doesn't give them any info. It means nothing. Or like I am particularly right now focused on how much random text is in websites. Just junk everywhere. It makes me so nuts. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, nobody cares. Nobody cares about, and I think it's probably generational. At least a portion of these people are like my age, where we used to have like a million pop-ups. But nobody, it's like they're doing, everyone's websites are peripheral vision stuff. So it's like this distracting text and pictures that like feel like it's bothering you. And our game is basically center vision stuff. Things that people will focus on, hone in their energy, and literally go to the landing page of the product that's in the game. So it's like a laser focus kind of thing.
And then so final question, and this is a little bit self-serving for PlayAbly, but I know we get asked it a lot, and that's about, how we make the game feel authentic and true to the brand. I'd love for you to explain sort of like what we do there and how we say we reskin it, but what does that actually mean?
This is like the most fun for me, I think, because I love design and I love like the story and the immersion in it. And so what we do is we get your branding family, but we talk to you and then we make sure it looks like you did it. And so we're very competitive. I mean, game designers just generally are by nature because like we're coming up with ways for people to win and we want to win at doing that. So it's like kind of in the nature of it. But like, and I have not done any of these quizzes, games, any of these that I haven't won. Like we literally, our whole team, we have like a 90% completion rate. Like It's because we're so geeks about this. So we take every element we can to make sure it matches what you have. It should not feel different. So yes, it's like colors and font families and stuff like that, but it's actually other very subtle cues. And like there's subtle cues like some brands, for example, have not just high key colors, but also they put it in very specific places. So we spend a lot of time really looking at your website. And then sometimes actually we will go to a different look on purpose. Let's say, and this is something I actually think brands understand. Let's say a special ad, like you're doing a special campaign and you've gone to a branding agency who picks out something different. We can match that for you. So if you're doing a product launch and you want to do something that's in a very different ecosystem, we're there. We will literally match anything. And our goal is in many ways that PlayAbly disappears and your brand shows up. And that's all such subtle cues. And I always think about this because, like, in my team, we have so many discussions, so many. This would be banal to anyone else. But is the button, should it be square too? Should it be rounded a little? Is it 15? Is it 10? Why are they doing it? Like, we spend a lot of time on those kinds of things. So you don't have to. It's completely white glove. So you don't have to be like nuancing this. I had somebody who came from brand when you worked with agencies, a lot of times you were like, stop. Like it just, there's so many times where you're like, why? Comic Sans? No, not really. But, like they're picking something cuckoo. So we don't do that. We do follow any agency you have or any branding you have. And so you can just enjoy the reap the benefits, basically.
Love that. So if you're interested in the game, as always, hit us up on PlayAbly.ai, book your demo, and mention the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Seema, for joining. And you'll catch you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to the PlayAbly podcast. Ready to engage your customers like never before? PlayAbly creates branded, shoppable games that drive results. Don't forget, mention the podcast during your free demo and get $500 off. Learn more at playably.ai.